All right, and we're back. It is COMP397, and it's the winter 2016 semester. It's week 6, part 1. Last week, if you remember, when we were doing our stuff, we got together and we did most of the slot machine's UI, right? And part of it was, you know, that ugly graphics stuff we have to do one time. Remember I told you, one time we're going to do graphics and probably not for a while. But let's talk about what we're going to do today in terms of showing that up. So again, just for those people who aren't able to make it today, assignment 2 slot machine will be pushed to Monday at midnight, right? And again, I get some suggestions for some very good students here that are saying, please, Tom, don't do it on Fridays anymore because we need you to get some feedback and then maybe do some tweaks and then hand it in on Monday. I'll do that. I have no problem moving things around. Because at the end of the day, it's got to be. I mean, if I put it on a Friday and everyone's late, that doesn't make any sense, right? So I'll try and do whatever I can to move things around so that they're due Mondays from now on. Okay, let's try and get into this. So I'm going to bring up the last thing I was working on, and again, my project is going to be called, or is called, COMP397 Winter 2016 Slot Machine Demo. This is the one that I'm using. I'm just going to pull that up here in my Visual Studio Code. So let's bring that in, Slot Machine Demo. By the way, who's still using Visual Studio? Anyone still in the class? It's okay. That's fine. I mean, you should have no problem. In fact, if anything, it's maybe a little easier for you than if you were to use just Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a little bit more advanced because you have to do things from scratch. Okay, but let's talk about where we were left off last time, because there was a couple things we did that were, you know, we kind of didn't have a chance to finish. I'm going to bring up GitHub just to make sure that everyone's on the same page with me. And if you weren't able to follow along for some reason, let's say, for example, I went a little bit too quick or whatever, and it didn't work for you, I recommend you go into COMP397 Winter 2016 Slot Machine Demo, which is up here on GitHub under github.com/Centennial College. Okay, so that's where you can kind of catch up with me, and then we're good to go. All right, so this is where I'm starting off from here. So let's talk about this. I'm going to just close some of these off so we can be on the same page. There we go. And if we look at scripts for a second, let's look at our structure so far we have. And as a recap too, in my index.html, remember that one of the things I'm going to tell you about is we have this structure where here in the body tag, I have an onload, right? This is the, I don't know, quick and dirty way to load our project. Unload is equal to preload, right? And we do that in the body tag. But one of the questions I've got recently was, hey, what if I don't want to do this? Is there a way of loading my project without having my body tag? Because this is kind of like an event handler that's an attribute, which in JavaScript we'd like to avoid these days. Okay, to be honest, we don't want to use attributes. It's almost like inline code more than anything else. We want to try and avoid inline code. How do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is get rid of this. So let's just get rid of this thing here in the body tag. So this is something new for you guys. And now, of course, it's not going to run, even though I've loaded everything up and it comes to my I remember what JavaScript does is it goes, or HTML, it goes line by line. It includes everything I've got in line until it gets to the end, and then finally includes in the cache, this last game.js file, right? That's what it does. But even if you include it, unless I call my preload function, nothing's going to run. Like if I was to run this thing right now, let's do that. So I'm going to kind of go into reveal in terminal, and let's try that again. Reveal in terminal here. I've colored my terminal a little bit differently these days. There we go. So you can see that I'm in my terminal view and I'm on the master branch. And you can see that if I run it, so let's say if I do something like HTTP server and I run it on HTTP server, and so now I'm at localhost 8080. By the way, one of the challenges is people, when you use your browser, and if I bring it up with my browser, sometimes it'll cache the last thing. So let's use incognito mode to solve that problem. I'm going to kind of bring up a new incognito window. Here it is, and then we'll go to localhost 8080, and that'll be the latest incarnation. Okay, cool. So if I refresh, I'm like, hey, what's going on, right? I've taken away my onload function. That's what I've done, right? Let's see if I get any errors. So I go here, and I'll look at, to find any errors, and there's nothing. And you're like, hey, what happened, right? nothing's loading because I haven't told anything to load, so therefore nothing's running, and there's no errors because I haven't said I've loaded all this stuff up in space. And by the way, if I was to go in here and start, looking at things like stage, undefined, right? Stage is undefined. What would stage be undefined here? I mean, I do define it in my things, right? Stage is undefined. Why is stage undefined here in my browser? Remember, my browser holds all the variables that are defined and have some kind of objects attached to them. So stage undefined. How about canvas? Canvas, canvas undefined too, right? It's all undefined. They're undefined because we define them in our init function, which is never being called, right? We create references to the stage object and the canvas object in our code. If I was to go back to our code now, under our core library, if I go to game.ts, and if I go to the top, you can see that I've created references. These are just references to variables, but none of this is happening yet. None of these are assigned. In JavaScript, and just so you know, if you get an undefined, a lot of times it's because you haven't done anything with it. There's two possibilities actually. One of them is you haven't attached your JavaScript file to your HTML file. And the second thing is you've declared them here as, and especially in TypeScript, as references to some kind of classes, but you haven't done anything with them. Here's one we did define, asset data. We did define asset data as an object. So we should be able to see this without doing anything. We should see asset data here as, if I go out here to our back to the browser, and if I go back and I put in asset data, look, it even comes up with some code hinting, right? Asset data is there, right? So if I put that and press enter, you can see that I get a bunch of objects, right? Why? Because asset data is an object that I've defined, and I can look through here and look. I can see that there's a back button. That's one object. Here's another object. The next button. All these objects are defined because I have a variable assignment. Here's my variable, here's my asset data, and I use the assignment operator to tell JavaScript that this is an array of objects. That's what I've done, right? So therefore it's available. But all the rest, everything that's encapsulated in a function, until I call that function, not happening, right? So just to note that that's the case. So how do I call it? I want to do the onload event, but I want to do it in code. What would you recommend? Anyone have a recommendation? I want to load up my preload function when the window loads, but I want to do it in code and not in index with my index.html. That was the child step. We always do kind of things. We do a child step and then we do an adult step. This is kind of an adult step. Well, what's the script? Yeah. Oh, I can call onload. That's one thing I could do, and it would do that. I could preload. Okay, but I could do that. But what would be there's a disadvantage in doing that, right? By the way, you can do that. I can just call the function down here, right? That's kind of like if I was going to talk about child, like a child step, easy step, medium, and more advanced. The medium way of doing it is just calling the method. That's medium. But there's some problems with that because when you call the method, there's no guarantee. Sometimes if something else fails up here, as an example, it may not function. And when you call the method, it functions synchronously, right? So that may not work properly sometimes. Just FYI, if you ever try this, right? There's another way. What's another way to do it? Yeah. It could do document.ready, which is, you're talking about jQuery now, right? Document.ready or JavaScript. Right, on the DOM. So you can do that as well. What's an even easier way? I like that method. What's another way to do it? So you're waiting for the document to be ready and then you launch your stuff. So it's not blocking, right? The other way to do it is window on load, right? So you can do one of these. So at the end, let's say underneath before your scene is called, before this is happening, right? Because I just have a little log to see how many elements are in my scene. I just do a window, and the window object is available, right? Because it's part of the window. And then on load, right? Which is equivalent to what I did before with body tag, right? Window on load is equal to, and then you reference it, what is going to be the, because remember, window on load is an event handler, right? So I'm creating an event, right? Here's my listener. Window on load is my listener. I need a handler. So there's many ways to write window on load, and one of the ways is to say, upon load, I want you to call a specific function, and the callback function would be preload. So I'm going to call preload. Right? Now, if I do it like this, it's incorrect because preload, this is the call to the function. All I need to do is reference the function like this. Right? So I'm creating a reference to the function preload. Sorry. They interrupt me, I'm going to interrupt them, right? Anyway, so so we got this window on load, right? Let's see if it works. Sorry, guys. And I have to make sure that I transpile, right? Because I'm transpiling from TypeScript to JavaScript. Let's see if it goes. Sorry, and it's going to be hot in here now. Let's see if it works. I'm going to go back to my browser here and refresh, right? And now, you know, I'm expecting it to work, right? But I still don't see anything going on. Anybody else have a reason why this would happen, right? I did. Did it work for you? Right, because I'm saying like there's reasons, there's ways of doing this stuff all the time, right? So window on load, preload, right? So I'm calling this method, this preload method upon window load, unload, right? It's happening way down here. So it goes through all the functions, everything's declared, and then at the bottom, I'm doing this onload method, right? And if I look at the JavaScript to make sure that it's transpiled, I can see that the window onload method is there on the JavaScript file side. So that's cool. Totally is fine, right? All right, so sometimes, and again, I'm just going to show you this. I'm going to kind of relaunch this in my incognito window. I'm sorry about this, guys, but you know how it is. And also make sure that your my browser, take a look at this. It says my scripts lib jQuery minmap error 404, right? It doesn't exist. I'm getting an error here in on my HTTP server, right? Let's try this again. So I'm going to say, you know, localhost 8080. And then it doesn't load. Let me go back. It doesn't load. And I'm not getting an error. If I go right-click and inspect, right? If I go right-click and inspect console, right? Here's the console, and she's not running, right? No matter what I do, no matter how many. I don't know if anyone getting anything different? Well, you probably get the same thing as me. So, and the reason for this is because of the order of operations here. What's happening right away, right? Is that whenever I do an event, right, what's the scope of my window on load function? What's the scope right now? It's pretty simple. It's the global scope, right? The global scope. And when is this window on load function triggering? That's the other question that I want you to know. Well, you don't know. That's the answer. It's gonna be asynchronous, right? So it's gonna trigger because in its own thread, its own process, you got this window on load function. It's going to call the preload function. And if I call the preload function in its own way, its own time, if you will, so I'm calling the preload, and now I'm here, I'm loading assets, and I'm making a load queue, and all this kind of stuff happen. And notice that on complete, when this is complete, it's going to call the init function, and so on. That's what it's doing when I do this window on load preload. All right, so that's one. And making sure also that I've named it correctly, because if I don't name the function correctly, preload, nothing's going to load. So that's one. The other thing is that we don't have any of this stuff in a closure, right? Normally, when we do a window on load, preload, something like that, we usually have all my JavaScript inside of a self-executing anonymous function or an IFI, immediately invoke function expression. We don't have that structure. We have an open global scope for this whole document. So going back to what Francis said, which is calling my function, let's try that way. I'll show you this way. So I'm going to say, instead of window on load preload, if I just call preload like this at the bottom, and press and save, and then transpile. And let's see if this works, and we'll talk about why one way works over the other in a second. If I go back to this, and if I refresh, right, I still don't get any kind of thing going on. Anybody have a different solution? Yeah. Where should I put it? Well, it is outside, isn't it? Oh, wait, I've got it inside my function, right? So let's go back to my window on load preload. There's got to be a reason. We're troubleshooting, right? Here's my preload. Okay, save. Thank you for that. And now it's right at the bottom, and I'm doing it like this. Just again, we're just going over it with you guys. I'm glad someone caught it. And refresh. Now it's good. Here's something I've added in since last time. Notice that. Let me load that again. Watch carefully. What's happening there? Huh? Anybody? Yeah, I did a fade in for you guys, right? So I don't know if you guys know that, but I created a fade in. Even from a start to the slot machine, I've created a fade in and fade out. Okay, how did I do it? Let me go over the code. It's there in the code for you. If you actually go up online and look at the latest version, you'll see a fade in and a fade out. I did it, and if I'm not wrong, I did it in the scene object. If I go to scene object and I go to my, under my objects, I go to scene. Here's my scene. Notice that my scene super object, here's my scene superclass. I have two new methods. One of them is called fade in, which is a private method or protected method. Another one is called fade out, right? So fade in and fade out, how does this work? I use another one of our libraries. I use something called tween.js, right? And what tween.js does, it's really nice to create little effects like you would see in jQuery or something like that. I want to do a transition or transform. And what I can do is I can say, well, I want to load up my background. Here's my background, which would be the background image. And my background image, by the way, I can set it to whatever I want, my background, right, for the scene. And I'm going to say, well, okay, so my background is a new bitmap. Here it is, whatever that background is, right? And then I want to fade in. This is the image. And I want to pass in the transition time, right? So here's my transition time. So I've made the fade in and fade out methods variable. So whatever the transition time is, it's going to come in milliseconds. So how many milliseconds do I want to transition? I recommend at least 500 milliseconds or half a second or something. That's what I did for mine. You can go as long as you want. But how does this work? It says, okay, get this image, and whatever it starts, move to, here's your transition, an alpha of 0. That's the fade in. My image is pure black. So I got this black image that takes up my entire screen, right? Or a white image. I use white in this case, right? So a whole white image. It's actually an opaque white background that takes up the entire image. It's actually still there. It's just layered way on the top, okay? Like, I don't know, whatever layer I put it in. And then what I do is I fade out by changing from purely opaque, so 100%, opaque, to 0 opaque. So so the opacity is 0%. Or 100%, from the transparency, I go from 100% opaque to 100% transparent. That's what I'm doing by doing this. And I do it within a transition time. And I use the create.js ease, right? I use an ease in and out. That's what I do here to kind of ease into it and ease out. So it's not a linear transition. It's an ease in and out, okay? Now remember, we can use tween to do any kind of transitions or transforms, right? So if I want to move an object from one part of space to another part of space with tween.js, I can do that, and I can do it with a smooth curve if I want to. So I've included them in there for you, and this is probably the only time we're going to be touching on tween because we're going to do a lot of stuff manually, but I want to bring it in here because I want to kind of introduce fading in and fading out, okay? Again, all I'm doing is when I move from one scene to the other, I fade in, right, when I go in, and when I fade out. Let's take a look at this thing from a scene perspective, right? So if I go back to my scenes, so I go to, as an example, my menu scene, right? Notice that what I'm doing here in my menu is I'm saying, here's my welcome label, right? This is the first thing that's part of my start screen. I have my start button and my welcome label. I kind of instantiate those, and then, well, I have a fade in, right? And my fade in, it happens right at the end. And the reason why I'm calling the fade in right at the end, here's my background, and I set my background as a white background, right? I can choose a black background too. I can show you that change, very simple. And I set these set up background and fade in. Those are part of the scene superclass that I made, right? So, and notice I'm passing in 500. This 500 is 500 milliseconds. So I'm waiting for 500 milliseconds to fade in. So I'm going from pure black or pure white to, detail, right? And then I add everything to the stage. Okay, good. That's all I do. So when I leave, here's when I leave. So when I'm clicking the start button to go to the next scene, which is my slot machine, I fade out. And I use this callback upon fade out. When I'm done fading out, the fade out, my method, my fade out method allows me to pass in an anonymous function. That's what this does that I've written, so that after my fade out's done, it calls the change of scene. Here's my change of scene lines. That's what it does. So it's there for you to use. I'm giving it to you so that way if you want to use fading in and fading out techniques, you can certainly do that. Sometimes it's good for other things too. Like for example, if you want to fade in or if you want to make the scene kind of flash, like your player gets I've seen this done before too. And the fading in and fading out can be very quick. You can flash from fully opaque to fully transparent a lot. So you can go like bang, 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 and so the whole screen will shake, or the whole screen will flash. You can do that with fade with the same tween transition tools. Here's another thing. Remember that our scenes right now, we've been using static transitions. So all we're doing is from one, and then we're fading out, and we're fading back in. But there's nothing to say that you can't move the whole scene in, like swipe in from the left or from the right or whatever. It's just here. I've got my entire game object, whatever, off screen, and now I'm going to use some kind of other transition, right, where I do kind of like a swipe from the left or whatever. And you can do a lot of custom transitions from one scene to the other. One other thing for your games, just to let you know, we see a lot of times where you have almost like a an end of scene. Like you have a menu scene, and then you click play, and before you go right into the game, you have another scene that says, here's my instructions. And you might have some music for the instructions, like, hey, this is what you need to do. Okay, fine, I've made it from level 1, now I'm going to level 2. Bam, another transition scene comes and says, okay, here's your goal for level 2. Okay, click OK, I'm ready to play. Goes to level 2, you play level 2, bam, here's level 3's transition. And then every time you have another scene that kind of separates one to the other, or even a cut scene where you have some kind of special effect happening, or whatever. You can do all that with the scene framework that we've built together here. Okay, so questions around transitions. Again, I would invite you to look at our object, the scene superclass, where I've written all this stuff for you, right? So I've kind of created my setup background. And the tricky one is the fade out. The fade out, look at what it's asking from a parameter perspective. It takes 2 parameters. One is the transition time, and the other one is a callback function with a type of any. Remember I talked about type of any in TypeScript means it's kind of like not using TypeScript, right? It's almost like the workaround from using TypeScript, which means I can take any. I could have put a function in here as the type, but it might not be a function tomorrow, right? It might be something else. So I wanted to keep it flexible, and this is a great use of any right here, because you don't know what's coming in. So the callback itself, this callback function is going to be called, right, as an example, right at the end. Notice that I have a call. I use the call method, which I'm chaining. I'm using function chaining here, right, where one is chained to the other. Here's my first method, and then I use the dot accessor method to chain the next one, right, and then chain the last one. So you can do that with JavaScript a lot, just like you do with C# or with Java or anything else. It's called method chaining, right? We can use method chaining for the last call. Call, by the way, is built into JavaScript. The call method, right, can call any named function, right, or an anonymous callback function. You can do that too. So I'm passing in this information, a reference to this anonymous function here as a parameter, and then I'm actually calling it at the end. So as soon as I'm done doing my transition, I fire my next function, which is moving to the next scene. Okay, that's how I do it. Any questions around this? Please bring it up now, because we're going to see this a couple times throughout the course. All right, so we've done that. We're pretty much where we were last time, and now I want to get testing. So I want to see what we got. So I'm going to go back to the screen here, and I want to click my spin button. There's no criteria for me to stop playing. I can play now. I click the spin button, and when I do so, I should get a result. And here's my result: blank, blank, cherry, right? The question to you would be, how do I get from blank, blank, cherry, right, to actual images on the screen? I need to be able to do that. And how do they appear? Where do I put them, right? Well, again, I would invite you to take a look at what we've got here in our folder structure. So if I go back to Visual Studio Code, and underneath our assets folder, right, I think I put in under images, I might have an Excel spreadsheet called imagemap.xls. If you want to pull that down, you can certainly look at that. I'm going to pull that into my, just here in Excel. So I'm going to go into slot machine demo. And remember, we did this last time in our assets. I have mapped out where they're going to appear. So I'm going to double click on my image map, Excel sheet. And again, you can use an Excel sheet. You can use, you don't have to do this way. I do it this way because I like to keep track of everything that's on my screen, right? So that I don't forget. So I know that the first reel is at, it's got to be 44 by 44 for the actual, this isn't actually incorrect. This is not real. They're just images, image 1, image 2, image 3. And they're going to appear within the reel on the back of my screen, right? So if I go to here, this box, this rectangle represents the reel, but the images actually are smaller than the reel themselves. The reels are big, and the images are going to be square, and they're going to be in the middle. That's where I'm going to put them. Okay. So these are actually image 1, image 2, image 3, not reel 1, reel 2, reel 3. Let me just change that now so we're not confused. Here's image 1, and so on. Okay, so let's talk about this. I want to pump out my images to my screen, and you know, last time I said, well, I'm not gonna change any of this stuff. I'm not gonna, you know, create images for you, whatever. I have this white background. Here's my white background. And let's pull this up to see what the mockup has looked like. I have this thing called slot machine mockup that I kind of left from last time. I'm going to pull that up in Fireworks so you can see where I'm at. So we can, again, so I can, instead of using the blackboard or the whiteboard, you can see what I'm doing. So this is my image mockup. Okay, so notice that I have these little things here. These are these white images here that are going to appear. This is where the first image is going to appear, the second one, and the third one. Make sense? Very simple. Well, instead of making fruits, I'm not going to make fruits. I'm just going to type them out, right? So we'll make 7 little objects I'm going to put up, and every time I click the button, it's going to change the object. For you, you'd have real images. For me, I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. You can certainly download them or make them in Photoshop. I know some people have made them in Photoshop or whatever very simply. It's okay. I'm just going to take this, copy it. I'm going to go back into Fireworks, and it's a 44 by 44 image that I'm going to paste. Now, it's pretty small, real time. It's pretty darn small in here, right? So let's just bring it up. So one of my first images I need is the blank, because blanks are going to be abundant. So I'm going to kind of make that up. So I'm going to say, here's my blank. It's pretty big. So just select that, and then I'm going to change the background because the background is white. I'll change this to, I don't know, black. And we're going to, I spelled it wrong too. And we're going to kind of go down quite a bit. So let's say 10. Bland. It's not blank. It's bland. Right? And it seems pretty pixelated to me. Well, that's okay because my image is pretty darn small, right? So it is what it is here. Let's like make it a little bigger. So I think maybe 10 is too small, and I'll go to 12, right? Maybe even 14. That might be even nicer. Okay, good. And I think that might be too big, but that's what it is, right? So about 14, I would say. And if I pull it somewhere in the middle, and again, I want to kind of try and center my image as much as possible within this thing. I'm doing this so that way you guys can see what it would look like, you know, from a centering perspective. So there's my center. If I was going to center it from this side, as an example, it allows me to do all that stuff. So again, I'm about right there. What I see is probably around center. There's my blank. Okay, so I'm going to save this as blank.ping, right? So let's do that. So File, Save As, and you can do any program you want to do this, right? And I'm going to go into my my desktop, and it's going to go into my COMP397. And it's going to go into my slot machine demo. Here it is, in my assets, my images. I'm just going to call this. Now, there's different ways of calling this, but the smart thing to do, okay, I want you to follow me here, is to call it the exact same name as I have in my code, right? In the exact same way. Let me take a look at my code for a second, because I want to be smart, right? As much as I can be, anyway. If I go to core, my game.ts file, it calls my menu. From my menu, it goes to my slot machine. So let me look at my slot machine TS file. And in here, when I do my changes, notice that my blank is lowercase. That makes no sense because my blank is lowercase, but my grapes, banana, orange, cherry, and everything else is all uppercase, right? That means I want to call my image the same as my name. Why? Because I can load it up. I'll call whatever I call from here will be the exact same thing I use that's from my manifest that goes in there. I have to do one thing, so I don't have to search around for the path or anything like that. It's just made. Okay. So let's rename the blank from lowercase b to uppercase b just to accommodate that. So my blank is going to be capital B, and everything else is going to be capitals after that. In fact, I'm going to make them all like this. And you should do the same for yours. Now, it may not be my fruits. You're going to use your own. But for me, it's going to be called blank. Blank.ping, right? Good, let's do the next one. So blank, and the next one is grapes, right? Now, if I have to adjust the font, I will. So grapes, that's pretty big. Grape, yeah. Grapes, and let's make this so that it's 12 as an example. That kind of fits. Adjust the, the image so it's in the middle. Again, I do a readjustment. Grapes, file, save as, and we're going to call this grapes.ping. There we go. And now the next one. The next one is banana. Follow me here. Banana. I think that's going to fit. Banana. So file, save as, banana.ping. And after this, I'll upload it to GitHub, right? And then orange, file, save as, orange.ping. Why didn't I adjust the position of this again? Well, because it's the exact same size. They're all fitting, right? So that's why. Okay, cool. And now it's going to be cherry. Cherry, file, save as, as an example, cherry.ping. I'm going pretty quick. Bar, this is kind of in the middle, bar, file, save as, bar.ping. And the next one, which is bell and 7. So bell, file, save as, bell.ping. And then 7, I'll just type it out like that, file, save as, and then 7.ping. Okay, so there, I've got all my images now, right? So I've got all my images, and I want to pull them all up, but I need to include them in my manifest. So the next step for me is to go into my code, now that I've got all my images, and go into my my game.ts file where I have all my images in my manifest. And this is kind of getting cumbersome, yeah? I'm getting like adding a lot of stuff in here. Now, some people have suggested, well, why don't I make this as an example? Instead of doing this, why don't I create some kind of file that I read my images from? Like, yeah, but you're reading it from a file again. It means you're doing another file call, right? So yes, it's true. You could do that, or I could put this. I can bury this in another module. That I could do. So I have a module just for assets. That might be a good practice. We might do that a little later. But for now, to keep it simple, we're just going to keep it right here. So we can modify. So we're going to add a bunch of other stuff like sounds. We're going to do a bunch of stuff here. So let's put that in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I've got 7 spaces for it. And the first one, I'm just guessing, blank. And the next one is going to be grapes. And I think the next one after that was banana. And then after that, I don't have my memory is not as long as it used to be. But there's bar and bell, and let me see what this says here. Do you remember? Is it cherry next? Maybe it is. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be in order, by the way. But I mean, I have them. So cherry, and I think after that's what, orange, right? And then bar, bell, and 7, right? So bar, bell, and 7. Did I miss one? I missed one? Did I get them all? And by the way, see how this isn't showing up, right, in images? Because sometimes it does that in Visual Studio Code. It's a known error. Don't worry about it. It will show up. Let me just make sure I got them all. So banana, bar, bell, blank, cherry, grapes, blank, cherry, grapes. So that'll be bad if I don't get them all. And then I've got orange and 7, which is good. So again, I should have 7 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think I got 8. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8. Okay. Black back. Oh, I killed my white background, yeah? Aha. Yes. That's what happens when I have the 2 Seans in the house, right? That means I have twice the power, right? All right, so now that's one part, but the other part is I got to rename all this piece. So I did this is the ID piece in my manifest is the common name that I can use to call up the image, right? That's how this thing works, right? So I'm going to go blank, and I'm going to go over here now, blank, right? Grapes, grapes. And because the path has got to be correct too, right? Banana, cherry, orange, bar, and then bell, and 7. Okay, cool. So that I've got my manifest is complete, right? I've got all the images that I need to roll my my reels, to spin my reels. I got all the images here. Okay. Now they're simple images. They're not beautiful images like your images are going to be, right? But my images pretty simple. Okay. So that's one piece. The other piece I need is I need some logic, so that way when I spin my reels, so I've done my reel spin, And I'm going to get this done on my check. So as soon as I spin my button, my spin button click, I spin the reels. That's what happens, right? Okay. So after I spin the reels, the reels function returns a bet line. And my bet line that it returns is a string array. It's an array of 3 strings, right? So, you know, string 1, or string 0, string 1, string 2. String 0, it would relate to reel 1, right? String 1 would relate to reel 2, and string 2 would relate to reel 3. 0, 1, 2. Okay, that's what it does. So I get that. When it returns bet line, this thing returns a string array. Now I have to consume that string array, right, into something else, some kind of lines of code, right? How do I do that? So I've called this reels, and I kind of have to make a local variable here in my spin button, and I'm going to do it here locally in my spin button control, right? So when I spin the reels, a local variable takes on, you know, this as an array of strings again. So I've kind of declare a local variable of strings. So let's try this out. If I can do this as a local variable first. So we're going to call this the local reels array, right? Or reel, if you want, right? Let's talk about this. So some kind of thing like real images or images, whatever you want to call it, something that makes sense, right? Like for example, fruits might be the way I call it. So let's make a local fruits array. So I'll do that here. So I'll say var fruits, which is going to be an array of strings. So string array is equal to, and then instead of doing a console log, I'm going to take this reels function, cut it out, and put it here, right? So what this is going to do now, right, is it's going to take the output from spinning the reels and put them into a string array, fruits. So fruits 0 is going to be my first reel, fruits 1 is my second reel, fruits 2 is my third reel. So to illustrate this, to make sure that I'm correct, let's do a console log. This is the way to do this. This is step 1, console log, and then type in fruits 0, right? And then we'll do the same thing for fruits. Each line will be separate, just to make it illustrated even easier. And then make this 1 and 2, right? So here what I'm doing is I'm calling the same reels function, but I'm separating it into 3 lines. 0, 1, 2. Why? Because now that I have this, I have the friendly name that I need for my image, right? And I need 3 image objects that I'm going to display, right, somewhere on my screen. Call them image 1, image 2, image 3, whatever you want to call them, or, you know, result 1, result 2, result 3, whatever you want, or a result array, right, of bitmaps. That's what it is, an array of bitmaps, which might be the easiest way to do it. And then I can use a loop. If I do a bitmap array, I can use a loop to loop through them and place them in the right order, right? But for now, let's just do this and see what happens. So I'm going to transpile everything because the board, I've made some changes, and then I'll upload this iteration to the web. And let's go back into my code here and refresh. So if I refresh now, I got my slot machine. I go to start, and notice that it says starting slot machine, and I click spin, and now I have grapes, orange, grapes, and they're all separate and they're all strings. It was different than the object that I was getting last time. They're all separate strings here. This is good. If I spin again, you know, grapes, blank, grapes, again and again and again. It's going to give me different things every time I spin, and it's going to give it to me in the exact same way I want it. So I know this is working. I'm getting the data back from my little reels function, right? Let me go back. Okay, so this is my reels function. I call it, and I know it's called reels, but I don't know if that's a great name for a method. Anyone else have another name that I could use instead of reels? Because reels doesn't really make any sense. Usually a method should have some kind of behavior attached to it, like in the name, like set text, get info, you know, or whatever. Spin reels or something like that. You know, not play. Plays to is not us. So I want to rename this thing, and the way to do that, of course, is to right-click, and I want to rename my symbol, right? And I want to call this something like underscore spin reels. Okay, spin reels. And the reason why I want to do that is because it makes more sense for me to call it spin reels than something else, right? So here's my spin reels, method. I'm calling the spinReals method, and the spinReals method is returning an array of strings. And it's going to go into something I've called fruits locally here, right? Can't make it local though, like forever. I've got to be able to pull this out, and I need some kind of an array of bitmaps that I'm going to use later on. And I need to make it something that's inside my my class. It's a class variable that I need to use, just like I've done, you know, my background and my spin buttons and all this other stuff I'm doing right now, which, by the way, we're going to fix. Let's put inside here a private, again, it's something that I don't have to access outside of my function, my class, so I'm going to make it private. Private, and we're going to call this something that makes sense, right? Like, for example, reels. That makes more sense to call this thing reels, which is, right, a create.js.bitmap array. That's what it is. So my reels array is a create.js.bitmap array. Hey, question for you. This array of bitmaps, is it instantiated at this point? Do I have an object right now that I could use like this, just by doing this? Is that enough? Put up your hand if you think this is enough. That's good, because it's not enough, right? You need to instantiate it somehow, right? And you need to do it somewhere, in your start method, I'm guessing, and probably before your background images are all taken care of. I don't recommend doing it here, right? This is not good practice to do it here in your declaration, right? But it's somewhere where you want to kind of set it up so as soon as, this scene is instantiated, I call my start method. Some people might put it in their constructor, right? Almost like an initialization method that initializes stuff before we run start, right? I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't think it's bad to call an initialization method or something like an initialize. But for now, let's put it in our start at the top before everything else happens. I want to declare or instantiate my reels array of bitmaps. So how do I do that? I'll say this._reels, right, is equal to new. I'm going to use the new keyword, new create.js, new array, a new array. I'm going to use the array keyword, right, of type create.js.bitmap. That's the new methodology. That's the new syntax. And so what this does, and this might be looking very familiar to you if you do things with Java, almost identical, or even C#, right? So what am I saying here? I'm using the angle brackets to say I want to make a new array of type bitmap, a bitmap array. Right now, the bitmap array is empty. There's nothing. Each one of those objects or members of the bitmap array right now is an empty object, a null object, right? I haven't instantiated any of the members there. But remember, in JavaScript, arrays are also lists, which means I can push to the array if I want to. I don't want to do it in this case, but I could. So let's make some comments to that effect. So I'll say something like, initialize array of bitmaps. That's what I'm doing here, an array of bitmaps. I only need 3 of them. I'm not telling JavaScript how many I need. I could, but I'm not going to. And then I'm initializing it here. So I'm just instantiating this array of bitmaps here. It's a container right now that holds 3 bitmaps, or however many bitmaps I want. Okay, cool. Down here, now, when I call this function, I have an array of bitmaps, and what I want to do is I want to instantiate each of the bitmaps in their correct places. Now, let's do one at a time. Let's do one bitmap. Once we do one bitmap, then we can do the rest of the bitmaps, okay? And we'll do that probably in a for loop or something. Okay, so we got our fruits 0, 1, and 2 in console logs. How would I write this if I was going to write it in just as a new bitmap? Well, I'm going to access the reels function, so reels, right? And I want to say this.reels0, the first element of my array, is equal to a new create.js bitmap, right? Where I'm going to pass in assets.get result, right? And the friendly name that I'm going to pass in there. And where is that friendly name coming from? Fruits0. So this is what the thing is going to look like. It's actually going to look like this. Does anyone not understand this piece? So here's my array, my first element of my array. I'm adding a new create.js bitmap. I'm creating a new element there, right? And what I'm saying is I'm going to use the assets I preloaded my assets. I'm going to use the get result method of the assets, and I'm passing in a string that I'm looking for, the friendly name that's coming from my get result, my reals thing. Because remember, fruits are is just a I'm just getting the details from my spin reals here, right? In my fruits array, this temporary variable that I'm using, right? And fruits, it says my fruit 0, or I can call this images or whatever it's going to be. Image 0, image 1, image 2, right? The nicer thing to do, though, to make sure that this makes sense, because I'm going to put it inside of a loop, right? Is instead of calling this fruits, you know, call it something like, we'll rename this thing. So rename symbol to real, right? So I'll say, hey, in my reals 0, my first reel, right, which is the first rectangle, take the reel that I'm getting from spin reels, right, and I'm using real, that's how we do it, right, and then assign it as a new object. This is a whole new object that I'm putting into this array. That's all I'm doing here, okay? I'm explaining it a couple times so you see it. Let's test it before we do anything else. I'm not going to do a for loop until I test this one. Okay, this is part 1. I assign it. So this is instantiated, but I haven't added it to the scene. And I'm not going to add it directly to the scene. I'm going to add it, right? I'm going to add it to my object, to this thing here, right? We got to be very careful here when I do this, because I'm adding it, right? Let me take a look here. Remember how my scene works. I have my stage.addChild this. Stage.addChild this, what this does is it adds my game container, the slot machine container, to the stage, right? But I want to add my reel, the reel, to my container, which is my game itself. So I'm going to, instead of stage.addChild this, I'm going to say this.addChild and whatever the reel is called. So reel 0 as an example, right? Let's try this out. So I'm going to say this.addChild and then reels 0. That's the second thing I'd have to do, right? Because reels 0 is going to be something else that let's do this properly, this._real 0, right? Where this is the one that I'm going to add to this stage, which is going to be added through my container. So this is the one thing. Now, where is this going to appear by default? It's going to appear at the top left corner of my screen, right? Because that's the X and Y coordinate by default. I don't want it to go there. I want it to go, right? The first one's got to be at X216 and Y220. Right? Let's see if I can do that. So I'm going to say, well, that's cool, Tom, but I want to say this._reals 0 .x is equal to 216, and this._reals 0, not the one, .y is equal to 220. Right? There it is. So if I've done things correctly, I'm going to transpile, and when I click the button, only my left eye is going to start blinking. Right? My middle eye, nothing's going to happen. My right eye, I've got 3 eyes. I'm a three-eyed monster right now, right, with my slot machine. Got 3 eyes. My left eye is going to be the one that's going to change. The middle and the right eye, they're still going to be blind. All right, let's see if it goes, right? So if I've done this correctly, and if I refresh my screen, okay, I've got my start, and if I click my button, I should be able to get, hey, there's orange, right? Let's click it again. Is it orange again? It is by chance. Okay, let's click it again. Blank, and then, you know, blank, blank, couple blanks, grapes. You can see that blanks are going to appear more often than what it is, right? So there it is. Hey, but how do I know this is actually swapping the image? Am I swapping the image here? What am I really doing? Be very careful when I say this, because I'll tell you what I'm really doing. I'm cheating, right? Because swapping the image here is more difficult than it sounds. And I'm going to ask you some questions about image swapping in a second to see if you know what I'm talking about, right? Here's how I'm cheating, okay? Let's take a look. What am I doing here when I use the new keyword? It's image 0. So imagine I have a container. Forget that it's an array. I have a container, and it's a bitmap container, right? And I say, I use the new keyword. And every time I click the button, I use the new keyword. What does the new keyword do? What was that? New object, okay? And then I'm adding this to this object to the screen, to the thing. Is that good? let's check that. Let me check that. And the way to check this is to do one of these. So instead of this console log, let's kill these console logs here. And just I'll put one in there, and let's talk about this. I'll say console log, and inside there, every time I click the button, I want to see what the size of my objects are. I want to say this dot underscore dot num children is what I want to print out. So I want to say, show me the number of children that this thing has. This dot num children. This, remember, I'm using this. My scene is a subclass of the container class. And each container, including a scene, can have a number of children attached to it. The num children property comes with every container that's part of Create.js. So I can use that, almost like the length of my display list. What's my length of my display list? That's what I'm asking for. All right, let's see how, does it grow? Does it change? Because this would be really destructive and bad if they kept on adding over and over again. Is that what it does? I got to mention this because it's very important for you to understand this, because if I keep playing this game long enough, and if I keep adding children, then that'll not crash, but it'll take up more and more memory, right? Let's see if I'm right, if it's true, or if it doesn't get wiped out. What happens? So refresh, play, and then spin, 7. I got 7 objects. Spin, 8. Spin, 9. Spin, 10. What's happening? I'm extending my playlist, my display list keeps going bigger and bigger. And what's happening is the reason why it looks nice is because one image is on top of the other, is on top of the other, is on top of the other. I don't want to do that. That's bad, man. That's really bad. Because I'm gonna crash eventually in a bigger program. If we did this, my game would crash. It would slow down, crash and burn, right? So this is not the right way to do it. What's another method that we can use here to do the same thing? So we've got this new, right? And I want to definitely add this child, you know, to this object, this child. I want to add it to my game, right? But I want to clear the other ones away, right? What are ways we can do that? How can I clear the other objects away from I have them and they're gone, right? And the other object is each of these things here, this dot real 0 as an example, it has, because this thing here represents a bitmap, we can use all the bitmap methods. An example of that would be this. I instantiate a real object, right? And I want to change it, right? Well, I can always go down here somewhere and do one of these. I can say this dot underscore reals 0, right? Real 0 dot image. I can do that, right? And I can change the image and point that to some other image. Can I do that? Yes? I could do this, right? I could, because image, because my real 0 is just an array of bitmaps, so the bitmap that I'm pointing to has an image property, right? So I could say this dot reals image is equal to this, right? But the only way this is going to happen is if I do this new stuff, right? If I do this as an example, I only have to do this new once. I don't have to set up, you know, new objects every single time, just one time, right? So I need a for loop to go run through this thing and add 3 objects or create 3 bitmaps that all I'm going to do is every time I go through it again, the second time, I'm going to run through this and just reset the image over and over again. But I need somehow to use the new keyword at least 3 times for number 0, number 1, and number 2. I need to do that first somewhere, right? So I could do it up here. And when I do the arrays, as an example, I could push 3 new empty bitmaps right in there, and I could push as a default 3 blanks, because you know what, my slot machine will start off as blank. I could, or some random image that I want, whatever, however I want to do it. So let's do that. So I'll say something like, when I instantiate it, I want to make a for loop, right? And I'll say for var, you know, real, var local variable, right? Which is what type of it is. It's a number, right? Var real, where real, right, is less than 3 hard code. When I say hard code, that means maybe not a good thing, right? 3 reals. Then real plus plus. Go to the next real, right? I could do that. And inside my for loop, I could say something like this: this dot underscore reals, right? And then it'll be real, and then is equal to a new create.js.bitmap, right? And then inside my bitmap, I want to put in my assets.getResult, right, as an example. And inside my getResult, I want to put in the blank. So I could do this first, right? So this is the first thing I can do. So I initialize this structure here, and I set up each one of my my reals as a blank image. So I first do this. So inside my array, there's something, all right, right away. Then later on, I can change it, right? By the way, Sean, would you have another solution, another recommendation to this? I've set up my array. You do this kind of the same way? Yeah, because Sean kind of did this already. Okay, so if I go down here now, instead of doing this, which uses a new keyword, I want to do something like this. I want to use the image that changes every time I do that. How do I do this image change? Well, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go one of these. I want to say, so image, as an example, is equal to a new. I don't want to do new. I want to talk about the image. So how do I do that? Could I do one of these? Assets.getResult, you know, kind of thing. Can I do this? What does assets.getResult return, right? My image doesn't, I mean, I can't do this, right? What did you do? How did you make it work? What is your, how do I assign an image to this thing? Do I do a new bitmap? I can't do that, right? How do I change my image? Could I just assign the path? I guess that would be bad. I'm not using my preloader anymore, right? So what did you do, Sean? Don't delete it. I'm just question because I want to see from you. What do you guys recommend? I need the path. What does getResult give me? GetResult gives me, right, an object. It's a blob, actually, is what it gives you, right? So I'm not getting the path, the image path from my result. And real zero, by the way, real zero doesn't make any sense here. But real zero is taking the real, which is coming from the string. It's just a string that I'm putting in here, right? The string. What did you do? Just this, like this? Yeah. The reason why it's not working for me is because image, right? For image, it says the type object is not assignable to type HTML image element. And because image is an image element, a canvas element, an HTML video element, typed object is not assignable to that. It's not an image or video element. So I can't, it's telling me, TypeScript is telling me I can't do this.
It told me I couldn't do it, but I did it work.
See what I just did? I know it works. If you go to your API documentation, this thing is what I'm getting, right? So it's normally what I'm going to get with getResult, right? The output of my getResult, which is part of my preloader, right? Right here is an object. You know what I need to put in here, don't you? I need to change this object to something else. What does it got to be? Any. Let's show you this. So I'm going to go back to this to fix it. If this works, well, I don't know if it's going to work. I'm telling you, I remember from the API documentation that this is the way it works. So let's check this out and see if it's a problem. So I'm going to go down to typings. I'm going to go into my preloader. Remember, all our type definition library does is help us with, by getting code hinting. So I want to look at this getResult. So I'm going to kind of search for getResult. There's getResult. And notice that the output for getResult is object. Okay, cool. I'm going to change this to any. Now, the nice, easy way to do this, instead of any, sorry, it should be lowercase. Instead of any, if you want to be very clear, is, and again, because of TypeScript 1.5 and later, you could do one of these as well. Object or any. I could do that too. That means there's two options. There's two outputs. This is kind of weird in JavaScript, but you could have two different returns, right? One that's an object or the other one that's something else. I could put something else in here like string, right? But I'm not getting a string. I'm getting any, and that's what getResult returns, right? So that's one option. But this is telling me that I returned something, anything, something else, an any. And I don't know what it is, right? And I'm listening for a string. So is this going to solve my problem? So let me go back to my game.ts, right? I'm sorry, my slot machine.ts file. And now you notice there is no issue. Because when I kind of hover over this thing, this object that says my get result is any, it's going to go to the largest kind of result, right? Now I can attach that to an image because it's just returning anything. It's a workaround. It's not a great workaround. I'm not happy with it, but it might fix my problem. Let's try this out. I'm going to transpile and see if this works. And all I've done here, just to let you guys know again, is I go into the preload and I added this or a pipe that says it's either object or any. This is the TypeScript way of doing things. Okay, let's go back and check it out and see if it works. And of course, I've preloaded and I refresh. And now let's see if I get an error. So I start it, started off. I got 6 objects in my scene. Spin. Oh, what happened? Right? Let's go back here and it says slot machine spin button click. Right? I have a problem. It says uncaught type error, cannot set property image of undefined. Right? Image of undefined. Well, that's weird because didn't we make that image? Right? I'm showing you what what you can do here. Back down here. How is this undefined? Right? It's reals 0. Right? Reals 0. And up here, I've initialized my reals, which is right here. Here's my reals. Right? My reals is an array. And I instantiate it with each one of these reels is a new create.js bitmap, which is a blank. As an example, I've done this. What do you mean? Blank, right? Well, for this to know this, and this is in my start method, right? This is the only time I get the other one is when I click the button. This happens right on start, right? So it happens right on constructor, on my constructor fire, right? You guys can't see it because it's in the superclass, right? But if I was to look at this and then show me what it is, if I do a console.log, and just do something like this, this dot underscore reals, right? Real. I want to show what that is, and I want to show you that. It's going to show us something, but there's a step that I'm missing here that's pretty simple. And I want you guys to figure out what am I missing here from this for loop? I'm missing something, guaranteed. Well, here I am, start, and then I click the button. I get this error, and I got this error that goes here. In fact, if anything, notice that I don't know why, but I didn't even get there. Let me go back. So ran through this for var real. Oh man. That's one issue, right? And let's get to this again. Let's try this again, right? So I'm still gonna have a problem down here, right? Because this is the other problem I have, because I'm adding the child here. I don't want to do that. This makes no sense down here. All I want to do now is I want to change my image down here, not my child. If I keep doing this, I'm gonna have the same problem. I'm gonna add a child every time I click. I don't want that. I want this to be on the initialization step, right? So I'm gonna take this out and put it up here. Right? Now, again, I'm going to move this into its own method in a second. You'll see, right? But I want to put this here, right? And I don't want to call it real 0. It's going to be called reals of real, right? So this, I'm going to add this to the scene. Yay, my add child. Is that? Okay, position. But the position, it can't be the same because that means all of them are going to be in the exact same place. Is there a function? Is there something I can put in my for loop that adds them in order, right? Well, in order for us to know that without being too crazy funky, we have to figure it out. If I start at 216, what's the difference between 216 and 300? Because it's always going to be the same Y position. The Y position is going to be 220. So in here for sure, 100%, when I go back to my code, I could put something like this. This dot underscore reals, real, oops, real, dot Y, the Y position is going to be 220. I know that's for sure because they're all going to be 220 every time, right? So that's the actual position of the image. Okay, cool. But the X is going to change. It's going to start at 216, and the difference between 216 and 300, so if I go difference between 216, hold on, minus 300, right, is 84, and the difference between 300 is the problem, right? The difference between 300 minus 383 are going to be slightly different. It's 83. What's that? This is the difference between one and the other. If I go through my loop, I'm going to add 84 every time, right? So the first one I'm going to put at 216. The next one's going to be plus 84. The third one's going to be plus 84, whatever it was. You understand? No. The for loop is going to start. I'm going to multiply my x position by whatever the for loop is times the number. Okay, so that's how it's going to work. So I got to make a concession here. If I want to use my for loop instead of 84 and 83, I'm going to choose 1 pixel difference. So you know what it's going to be? It's going to be 84. Right? That's what it's going to be. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to change this 383 just to keep track to 384 to make it exactly the same. Right? 84 and 84. Now that I know that, these are my new positions. So it's not exactly how I had to plan. It's going to be slightly off. Probably not going to be noticeable to us. 1 pixel is not going to break us. Okay. There's other options here as well that you can use. But for now, let's do this. So I'm going to go back to this. And this is how I'm going to code it. I'm going to say, well, this dot underscore reals. Actually, we'll do it above just to be x and y, just to be, from a programming perspective, you want to say, you know, it's got to make business sense too, right? So this dot underscore reals real dot x is equal to, hold me here, right? 216 for sure, plus, and this is in brackets, real times 84. Okay, if I can actually put that in there. Why is it like this? Why is it real times 84? How is that going to work for the first one? Well, because I start at 0. So 0 times 84 is 0. So the first one's going to start at 216. The next one's going to be 1 times 84, which is the next position. And the next one's going to be whatever it is, 2 times 84, right? So that's how it's going to change the x coordinate every time for that loop. So I'm going to do it in a loop instead of I have to copy those lines over and over again. That's bad, right? All right, so that's how I add them in. So I've got my positioning. That means that down here, I don't have to do that. I don't have to do this anymore, right? I just have to do this. Just change the image. Okay, let's check this out if it actually changed. So I'm going to kind of transpile. Hopefully I've done all this right? I'm going to go back to my thing here, refresh, start my game, press the button, and I got 9 images. 9 images, 9 images, 9 images. Never going to go higher, right? Why? I'm not adding any more images in. But here's a problem. I can't be getting blanks all the time, right? Something's not right. And I can keep pressing this as much as I want. Notice that the number of images is not going to increase, right? Something's still not right, okay? Because I'm still doing this. I'm changing my image. Here's my image. Assets.getResult real 0. It's still doing the same thing. I'm still targeting my real 0. This is what it is. And what was that? And the loop appears just a blank, right? So the blanks are there. And here's something else. My real, this dot reals real is never firing. It's another thing that happens. How come? This, I never come to this. Did you notice that? Let me show you this. So if I say real, right? Real, whatever the thing is, real plus space plus to format what it's going to look like. There it is. And I transpile, right? I'm not getting the error anymore. But every time I run through this loop, and it's going to happen one time on start. On start. So as soon as everything starts, I'm going to create my array as an example. And it's going to add these 3 objects in my array. Oh, man. This is bad. What am I doing wrong? Come on, peoples of the world. Peoples of the world unite, right? What's happening? No, it's working. It's working. I'll tell you right now, it's working. It's doing exactly what I'm telling it to do. And you're going to run through this problem, and you're going to go, Tom, I don't know why, but my reels don't work, and I can't make it go. It's actually working. What's happening here? Think about the display list. What's going on? Guys, you guys are either sleeping or you're not, like, you know, you don't want to say. Take a chance, make a mistake. Come on. They're behind everything, right? It's happening right here. I put it at the top of my code, right? Which means that all this other stuff, my background image and my bet button, all that stuff is in the front of it. I don't want that. I want this initialization to be at the bottom right? Just before I do my my stuff over here, my somewhere down here, I got to put this in, and it's got to be done somewhere probably before, you know, I'm setting up my white background and everything else. Doesn't matter my white background, because you know what? At the end of the day, that could be after, and it should be after, because then my fade in effect won't work. So it's got to be between my fade in, my fade in background and the background and the other stuff that I have, right? So it's got to be somewhere here. This is where it's got to appear. The order of whenever I enter stuff into my stuff, my scene, it's got to be in the order that I put it in. It layers in the order that I enter it. So my background's first, on top of that is the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And so if I don't put it in the right order, it's going to go to the back. I could enter in manually with a number. Like, for example, add child at. There's another function to do that. But that's dangerous. That's dangerous, because when I do that, if I add child at, it messes up the display list, and I don't recommend it, right? I think the best way to do that is just to put it in place. So let's just do that. So we'll cut this out, and then we'll call it a method, okay? So I'm going to call this out here, and I'm going to put it down here. Okay, there is where it's going to be, and we're going to see that this console log is going to fire for a second. Watch. Okay, cool. I'll transpile. And I've got this thing down here. It's going to go to my spin button, and and then it's going to do all this. Let's try this out. So go back to here. Go back to, all right, maybe it's somewhere here. Well, there's, and refresh. Right there's my refreshing. Go back down here, starting my opening scene, starting slot machine. Here's, look, here's reel 0, here's reel 1, here's reel 2. So you see that it's initialized. Now the name, it's interesting. My bitmap name is equal to null. That's bad. Something's not right there. Because I'm getting my bitmap. I'm actually printing them out, right? So reel 0, reel 1, reel 2, and the bitmap name is null. That's not good, right? Let's try this out. But I'm getting blanks here. Take a look. So my blanks are here, blank, 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 which is what I wanted, right? If I click the button, my 1 is going to always change. And notice that I'm not going to increase my stuff. The reason why it's saying name is equal to null is because remember that bitmaps can also have a name attribute that I'm not assigning. Like, for example, bitmap 1, bitmap 2, bitmap. I could assign them, but I'm not doing that right now. But I know that it's working because I'm getting this happening. It's the errors, there's no errors here. Okay, cool. Now that I've got that, I'm home free, right? And then I'll upload, I'll take a break, and do all this stuff. I'm home free. I initialize here, and then every time I click the button here, I change all these things, right? Well, now I can run through another loop. So I can go for, as an example, and we'll talk about other optimizations we can make. Var, and again, I could use reel for the reels, you know, method or whatever. And maybe I change this as something else, like image, lowercase I is, I'm getting an image, a string of images, or bitmaps, lowercase b, not capital B. So if I use lowercase b, it's a problem. So an example in here, I can go, I'll rename the symbol again to make it so it matches what I had up there. So var bitmap is equal to whatever, and then I put my bitmap in there, right? That makes sense. And then what I could do is I'll say var real, which is a number, is equal to 0, and then where real is less than 3 again. Oh, I hate that. Hard code, hard code. And then real plus plus plus. Right? And then add that in, add this piece into there, right? And then change this 0 to real. Right? That would do the exact same thing. And add with 1 or 3 lines, I can add this stuff in. So as soon as I click my spin button, then I change the reels every time. Let's get rid of all this, because we know the number of children aren't going to go up anymore. Right, and we're going to be in the right locations. Let's try it out, and then I'll upload the GitHub for you. Okay, cool. So save, go here, refresh. Let's kill this now. So I'm pretty confident it's going to be okay. Start, transpiled, and then spin, and now I'm spinning, and my images are changing. This is half the work right here, guys. Once you get this piece done, and my images are changing as much as I want. There's nothing that's stopping me though. I'm not checking to see if I have enough money, right? And that's what we're going to do when we come back from the break. Okay, so let's take a short break, and I'll upload to GitHub, and we'll come back and do the next piece.